Welcome, brave souls, to another haunting chapter of Ghost Girl Diaries, where the supernatural awaits, transmitting from the other side, where paranormal meets glamour. I'm your host this evening, Crystal Leandra, the Queen of the Dead, a paranormal filmmaker and investigator, and the glam behind the ghost hunt. Here we dive into spine-chilling hauntings, explore the unknown, and uncover the secrets across the most haunted locations in the world. Whether you're a believer or a skeptic, you're in for a thrill. So grab your EMF meter, your crystals, and your cross, because things are about to get supernatural with a little bit of glam. Let's get haunted. This is Ghost Girl Diaries.
I'll say it once, I'll say it twice. I'm only into werewolves and vampires. That's just never gonna change. If you know, you know. Welcome back, my spooky ghouls, to another Ghost Girl Diaries podcast, where we talk about paranormal, the unexplained, and everything that goes bump in the night. I am your host, Crystal Leandra, and tonight we're talking about the dark, twisted side of love. Sounds like my kind of podcast. Forget the roses and chocolates, because Valentine's Day hasn't always been about romance. To be more specific, it has a history soaked in blood. From the pagan fertility rituals of Lupercalia, those were in ancient Rome, to one of the most famous killings in America, the St. Valentine's Massacre. This is a podcast where we talk about paranormal, spooky, unexplained, and anything that goes bump in the night. And of course, we'll talk about what's lurking in the shadows, because places where blood has been spilled rarely stay silent. So let me be your Valentine's Day. Turn the lights down low and grab your favorite dark chocolate, and let's get into it. Before there was what we know as Valentine's Day, there was something much darker. An ancient Roman festival called Lupercalia. This was celebrated from February 13th to the 15th. And let me tell you what, this was not your average date night. So if you've never heard of this before, this is your warning. It was a wild, primal few nights full of lust, chase, and of course blood. Because how else would the Romans do it? What exactly was Lupercalia? This was held in Rome, and this was essentially a dedicated festival for Lupercus, who is the god of fertility, and Fanus, the god of the wild. Maybe pronounced Phanius, but I didn't live back then, so I can't be specific on how pronunciation goes. This was celebrated in the Lupercal cave. Can we go? Does anybody want to go on a road trip? Well, it wouldn't be a road trip, it would be a flight trip, but still. Okay, no, I have to make sure I say this correctly. This cave is where Romulus and Remus were said to be nursed by a she-wolf, and it was a festival of essential purification of the body's fertility, and it was just raw, chaotic energy. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this was a fun fertility festival. Oh, no, babes. This was some real blood magic shit, okay? Because it all started with nothing more than a sacrifice. The priests themselves would sacrifice goats. No, please don't ever sacrifice an animal. Please don't. If you ever do that, you're not welcome on my channel, okay? Because animals to me are sacred. So rather than sacrifice that animal, let's put it on a pedestal and let's worship the animal. Let's not unalive it. Please don't do that. That's terrible. That's horrible. But of course, it was a priest that did this. And, they would often smear the fresh blood across their foreheads to insinuate that the festival had begun. Okay, I said, are you ready? You've had your warning, right? Is everyone prepared? Okay. This is when the men, after they were ordained essentially by the priests and the people of the hierarchy, they ran through the streets, okay, naked, whipping women with goat hides, okay? Because in ancient Rome, that was how a man signified that he liked you or he even loved you. Sounds like my kind of party. Women would literally, willingly line up to be hit because it believed in this, practice of, calling in the fertility gods, that if you were whipped, it would increase your fertility and ease with childbirth. So women wanted this essentially. And maybe They were into the BDSM thing a little bit. I mean, they liked that sound of the cracked whip on their skin. This was essentially considered a love lottery. Men and women's names were basically drawn from a jar. Whoever picked your name was a partner for the festival, and sometimes permanently or beyond. Now, the Catholic Church eventually admitted that they hated this, and they decided to, quote, clean it up. And in 496 AD, I'm sorry, I'm going to laugh. Like, just remember all of our societies are based off of religion. And this is literally what the religion went back to. Catholicism and like paganism, like, is one of the oldest rituals on the planet. And this is why you really just shouldn't let religion or society rule your life as like general rule, because it's just morphed so much over time. Like, this is where we started. So anyway, there was a pope in 496 AD, and he essentially outlawed Lupercalia. He said, we need to replace it with a gentler version, and we're going to call it St. Valentine's Day. Bless his heart. Was there really a St. Valentine? I mean, maybe, maybe not. You know what I mean? Like, one legend says that he was a priest that secretly married lovers, and he was eventually executed for it, and that was why they sort of ordained him to be, St. Valentine. And then another legend says that he was a rebel that basically pissed off a bunch of Romans. And either way, the church needed something to replace this sort of wild, crazy, out of control pagan holiday with something else that was a little bit more at ease. But let's be real, the darkness never went away. I mean, even think about it to this day. Think about modern times. My room feels like my very much, Aries and Lilith in my Lilith and Venus and Aries. It's all red, right? It's about love. It's about lusting after someone. It's like there's something about Valentine's Day that, like, men go out, they're supposed to spend a bunch of money on you. Don't ever settle for less, ladies. Should not be just chocolates and wine and a nice dinner. You better be coming home with a diamond tennis bracelet, because I certainly don't settle for less, okay? And if he gives you a silver necklace, tell him to take it back, that you can buy that with your own money for $20, please. It's always been dark, though. Think about it. It's like, well, depending on how you make my Valentine's Day, is if you're going to get a little something later that night, right? Which is why the price tag for me is always high. Essentially, though, it's still the same. Lupercalia is just morphed into something a little bit more poetic, if you will. Like in an Edgar Allan Poe kind of way, poetic. Let's fast forward to February 14th of 1929. We're in Chicago. We're in the Prohibition era, and there's tons of gang wars going on. Love wasn't in the air. Bullets were. The players. We've got Al Capone versus Bugs Moran, okay? Moran's gang was lured into a garage on 2122 North Clark Street. Talk about numerology, 2122. We should look that up. I think that would have some significance behind it, or even totaling up 2 + 1 + 2 + 2. Capone's men were trying to outsmart everyone, and they literally dressed up as cops. They raided the garage. 7 men lined up against the wall, thinking that it was a literal police raid, and then gunfire broke out. Over 70 rounds pumped into them with actual Tommy guns. Bugs Moran barely escaped. The public was horrified, and this was organized crime at its finest. And it was brutal, and it was dark. I mean, imagine the visual scene with, essentially making people look like Swiss cheese. But blood doesn't just stain the ground. It stains the energy of the location. And that's why this spot is still one of the most haunted locations in Chicago to this day. Now, the actual warehouse where this happened was demolished in 1967, but the hauntings didn't stop there. We know with trauma like this, there's always going to be residual energy and paranormal activity. It's not just going to go away. It's almost like a permanent stain on the atmosphere. It's almost like ectoplasm. Now, what's often heard in this area? Gunshots, phantom screams. These are reported by people that experience it on the ground and even that pass by. There's a lot of reports of people walking their dogs who literally refuse to walk by the area. The dogs will literally refuse to walk through this area. I really do believe that animals have a sixth sense and they're very often connected to the other side. I think much more than we give them credit for. Speaking of that, my mother, I swear there's like a portal over my staircase, and I have her dog since she passed away. And there are times that my mom's dog almost sees her entering the house. And it's weird because it's not like it's on just a regular eye level. Like he looks up because it's almost like a cathedral ceiling. And when this happens, it's so odd. He was my mom's dog for, I guess she had him for 4 or 5 years before she passed. I have him now. But he made a certain sound when he was with her. And I know that sounds strange, but he has this almost baby cry to her. It's a very like baby whine. He doesn't do it with me ever. He never has. But every time he sees her spirit come in, he starts making that same sound as if he's talking to her. I've gotten it on camera a couple times. I'll try to find a clip. Anyway, people also report in the area feeling dizzy, anxious, or overwhelmed with sadness in the location. So once again, that stain in the atmosphere that's just on permanent repeat. Now, there's another problem in the area, which is Al Capone claims he had ghost problems. Capone himself, reportedly says that he was haunted by James Clark, which was one of the massacre victims, which I find very, very interesting. Capone claims that James' ghost was in his cell in Alcatraz. Even a gangster couldn't outrun his own karma, and essentially this ghost would torment his inside of Alcatraz, which we all know how crazy Alcatraz is and so isolated and so dark and so strange. And the dark criminals that were in there, I feel like would create its own mass of energy. It makes you wonder, does energy or the energy of violence ever really go away or fade? I talk about often how my spirit guides are so in contact with me. And they're coming through right now. Residual activity cannot be erased. It's an odd thing to say. It is stained. Okay. It cannot be moved, distributed, or destroyed. They're actually calling it like a dark stain. Dark stain. So sometimes when they're communicating with me, I'll see visuals. So I'm seeing almost like a black cloud. So I did just say ectoplasm, but they're literally showing me that it's like a black cloud. It's not necessarily intelligent, but it's like there's an energy that was created that exists on its own, and it can't be removed even by our spirit team or guides. It can't be destroyed. It's just there. That's interesting. I wasn't expecting to get that message. Do places like this become permanent scars for the spiritual world? And my guides say yes. Yes, they do. So my spooky loves, what do you think? Did Lupercalia really disappear, or did it just become something else? Was it rebranded by the Catholic Church? Perhaps. And do ghosts of the St. Valentine's Massacre still wander the streets of Chicago? Are they trapped in those moments of taking their final breath? One thing's for sure is that love and blood have always been intertwined somehow in history, and it has its way of leaving the dead and ghosts behind. I am fascinated by everything pagan, especially Lupercalia. I'm also very fascinated with Roman gods and ancient history. I'm fascinated with Atlantis and Nordic history. So hearing about Lupercalia, it's actually probably my second favorite holiday, Halloween being first, Lupercalia being second. I don't know, it's just fascinating to me that, once again, it's whipping women with cowhides, pagan witchcraft. Like, I don't think witchcraft is exactly what it was when it used to be. You know what I'm saying? Like, even if we're talking about the witches being hung and being persecuted, I think it was women who were into like herbalism and spiritualism. And I don't think it's what we think of witchcraft today, of doing spells and conjuring and even spirit communication or paranormal. I don't think that's necessarily what it was back then. And it's kind of proof with this, of having this sporadic, random pagan ritual under, the archdiocese, essentially, or what firmly was before the archdiocese. and rum. And it was just like a bunch of rabid humans lusting after each other, trying to get pregnant, trying to get each other pregnant, essentially. And it was about lust and love. Wasn't, even though to us that seems very Wiccan, right? I mean, whipping each other with rawhides. Back then, that was not how they saw it. So I think that it's really important to always define in our minds of as time goes on. At that moment, that wasn't necessarily considered what we see witchcraft as today. Make sure you follow Ghost Girl Diaries on YouTube, Patreon, Instagram, and me specifically, Crystal Leandra, on all platforms. Let me know in the comments, would you rather be in the Lupercalia lottery or be caught in a 1920s gang war? I mean, you already know my answer. I wish a werewolf or a vampire would chase me in the woods and try to whip me with a rawhide. What a dream. Until next time, my loves, stay spooky and happy Valentine's Day, or should I say, happy Lupercalia.
And that's a wrap on today's episode of Ghost Girl Diaries. Thank you so much for joining me in my crypt. If you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment. It helps the ghostly adventures continue. And also don't forget to follow me on all social media platforms. You can search for Crystal Leandra or Ghost Girl Diaries. Please support me on both. This is where you can catch exclusive content, behind the scenes footage, and stay up to date on all things paranormal and glam. And as always, stay curious, stay fearless, and stay spooky. And I'll catch you next time on Ghost Girl Diaries, where the dead never rest, and neither do we. Until then, my ghoulish friends, sweet screams.